the years, many manga, manhwa, and web novels have slowly became anime in the US market, and there is a lot more overseas that we will just never see in the US market. But in particular, what happens in the US is a oversaturation of the exact same genre over and over again, where they will take ones that are really, really bad and make them into an anime, either because the fan base is just super popular or because the artist is super rich and can post it. And there's usually something that goes wrong with these, and that usually includes them changing the story. Maybe the story wasn't as good as they thought it was, or it could just be something where they thought it was going to make them a lot of money in general. Whatever it is in the world, right? But almost every single person I've ever talked to about anime or web novels or manhwa, however you say it, sorry if the pronunciation is a little wrong, basically say ones like isekai, the ones like solo leveling where there's leveling up systems and stuff like that, usually have a good margin of just insane ones. Ones that you want to read, you want to watch, and over and over again, right? And then there's a very wide version of just ones you don't really care for in the slightest, which is fair. So today, what we're going to be talking about in particular is the beginning after the end. Now, the beginning after the end, in its manhwa or web novel form, is probably one of the singular best pieces of reincarnation to read at this current point in time. Just as a isekai, it's insanely good. And the reason it's insanely good, if you don't know what the beginning after the end is, basically this guy who is a king of, essentially, you imagine the modern world is ruled by a singular king, is the best way I can put it. The modern world is ruled by a singular king, and there's also magic at the same time. And then that guy ends up being eliminated at some point in time, and he gets reincarnated into basically just a pure fantasy world that doesn't have the super advanced technology, but is just like a fantasy kingdom with elves, dwarves, and all of those sorts of things. And throughout this entire anime, it follows this boy named Arthur, who is the reincarnator, who basically gets extreme powers. He uses a portion of his powers from the last world, but he unlocks like draconic powers and stuff as well. Spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen it, I would go read it or watch it now. And basically, how this goes is he goes over the course of time. I think he goes up to like 15 years or something like that, 15, 17 years, and he trains, becomes a warrior, goes into like a war. Like, it's pretty intense, but it gets you on the edge of your seat. It's a nail biter. It makes you want to jump up and do a little jig. It's great. It really is. But the anime isn't. And now, I'll say there's a lot of anime out there that the animation is terrible, but the story is really good, right? And the story can save animation. And I think that's a big thing that's true, especially for these newer ones that are making manhwa, manga, web novels into anime. Is the story most of the time will save the animation because it's very hard to animate from basically a still frame. You know, when you look at, let's say, One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, Dragon Ball, any of those, a lot of them in their manga are written in a way where you can already see how it's going to be animated. You can see the impact frame. You can see all of that stuff. Where when you read a manhwa or a web novel, it's usually like a still picture, and that still picture doesn't really have that many things going on in it. So you can give it the benefit of the doubt if they keep true to the story, and the story's still really good. But for some reason, the beginning after the end, they just don't do that. They're not sticking to the story, and the animation is mid. It's basically what I would imagine a random isekai coming out with. I mean, I think everybody knows, like, what was it, last year, 2 years ago, we probably got like a new isekai every other week. Like it was ridiculous because isekai were massive at that time. And because of that, there was a lot of mid isekai that came out that had this choppy animation, still frame, the so there was a lot of things that kind of went with that. And tbate is exactly like that. That's what the beginning after the end stands for. That's what people shorten it to, is tbate. So tbate basically went to the studio called ACAT and just absolutely demolished their fan base. And it's not saying that tbate itself, the creator, is getting hate, because even the creator realizes, he's like, man, this could have been better. Now he can't legally say that, but it's kind of funny. Even him is kind of being cryptic on Twitter of like, yeah, this kind of sucks, even though he's not legally allowed to say that it sucks. So the company he's working with basically just straight up lied to his face. And they told him that they were like mega fans of his manhwa. And he's like, wow, that's great. I think any creator would say that that's great. You would want a mega fan working on your manhwa. But, the first episode wasn't too bad. Like, the animation was terrible, but it followed along with the story pretty well. And I liked the voice acting. I will say that the voice acting in the anime, they picked like the perfect voice actor for the main character. Like, not only when he speaks out loud, but when he's playing the king as well, because obviously he's reincarnated, so he still has the king's voice in his head. And then over like the course of like a couple episodes, it just changed. It changed like drastically. It went from like, okay, it's terrible animation, but they're still following the story, to okay, they are going away from the story and there's bad animation, and the animation kind of got better, but it's still bad. And it makes zero sense. Like, I don't understand why it's so difficult for them to just like pull up like the manhwa on their phone and literally scroll through and be like, okay, this is what this character looks like. Oh, wow, no way. It's like what they're doing is they're producing the anime based off of whoever read its memory, is kind of what it feels like. Like if you asked a guy to like remember the entire Harry Potter book, like that's kind of what it feels like, where there's just like bits left out that make zero sense why they're being left out. And it's something that always irritates me in a lot of these anime that get animated from manga or manhwa, is they will just leave out tiny things that seem insignificant, I will say, but really do add a lot of depth to the story. And one of those things, for example, in the newest episode, they started showing off like the academy and stuff like that. From my memory, we like knew about the academy when he first goes to it. This is spoilers, by the way. We knew about the academy like when they first talk about it, but from my memory, he doesn't go there for a long time. Like he goes and does like dungeons and like joins the adventurers guild and stuff like that, and like levels up his pet dragon. So why is he at the academy right now? Or like why are they even showing it to us? Because just how I remember it, it wasn't like that. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I can go back and read it, but it feels like they cut like a major part out of the story. And I guess we'll have to wait until like next week to see if they like expand on that, I guess. But then they also just like will change character designs, cut out like small parts. And like I said, the stuff doesn't seem too significant. It's just annoying because you know that that part adds depth to the story. I think a really good example for this is one that does the same thing, is we have solo leveling. Solo leveling got animated, and the animation is great. I don't think anybody will deny that the solo leveling animation is great, and it follows pretty closely, but they skip like character development parts, right? So when you watch the solo leveling anime, he's essentially just aura farming 99% of the time. It's literally like him in the back of the room, and the entire time that like you're watching it, it's like, okay, well, like this is cool, but the reason people say solo leveling has a really bad story is because they just don't explain it in the anime. They cut out like the parts of like showing that he was like poor, or like showing that he it's like after the hospital scene with his mom. Spoilers if you haven't watched Solo Leveling. Like after the hospital scene with his mom, they like hang out, and that's the reason he did go to Juju Island, which is why they kind of explain in the anime a little bit, but there was like a full scene there that happened where he had to like run out of the house. Where I remember watching the anime and they were just like randomly he didn't go, and then like the next scene was like him ore farming on top of a building. Like why? And tbate does the exact same thing. They just will cut scenes or cut characters, and then they'll be like, well, why does nobody like us? Like, a cat, if you want to have bad animation, cool, but at least get the story right. You know, like that's a main reason I watch anime is for them to get the story right. Especially after I started reading the manhwa, and the mangas like a couple months back. So going into this, there's something else that's like extremely annoying in my opinion. Just in general, I think skipping the story is more annoying than the animation. But then when the animation is bad and you also skip the story, it makes me question why you're even producing the product in the first place. And it really sucks because in these countries where these pieces of art are made, basically, there is no system in place for anybody to get any compensation, essentially. Like, yes, could they take it to the courts in those countries? But from my understanding how those countries work is you will basically just be dragged through the courts for 6 billion years and you will never see the light of day out of that. I will say one thing that like really shocked me when watching the anime was they never switched Arthur's voice over at any point in time, at least not currently from the king's voice in his head. And you might be asking, well, why would you say that? But when you read the beginning after the end, there's a certain point in time where you just, at least for me, I don't think it's the king anymore, because there's parts where like it's the king talking, but after he kind of meets back up with his parents, he kind of becomes Arthur at that point, and that's where the internal struggle of him, knowing he's the king, but him wanting to live this new life as Arthur, I feel like really begins. He knows like the elf girl likes him. He knows that he's strong, but he knows that he wants to be in this world, and he knows that he's starting to develop emotions for his parents. So when I was reading it personally, there was like a switch in my brain where I was reading it as like the king, and then I started reading it as Arthur instead. And the king's voice slowly slipped into the background until he's had that kind of internal conflict about who he was. And then after, spoiler alert for way, way ahead, after he basically tells his parents that he was reincarnated, I think that's when he officially like puts down the king. Like 100% the king like disappears. So I wonder what they're going to do with that. But that's really all I wanted to rant about today, was how interesting the beginning after the end anime is, and really why there's so much backlash behind it as someone who actually read almost the entire thing. I'm not fully caught up, but I'm like right before the war arc, basically. So yeah, that's all I want to talk about. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the beginning after the end. And besides that, have a wonderful night. Peace.